Mrs. Yarodavers.
Ave Satanic! Hail Satan! Hail Satan! Hail Satan!
Greetings, heathens. Welcome to Hail Satan. This is the podcast exploring Satanism, culture, and life in general through the eyes of modern Satanists. My name is Joseph Rose. I'm a member of an amazing independent congregation called Satanic Delco, and we welcome members from anywhere in the world. If you want to learn a little bit more, visit satanicdelco.com. Today, I'm going to have a chat with Aaron. He has some feelings about self-help and how it connects to his Satanism, and we're going to explore his ideas a bit. First, let's say hello to a bunch of awesome new members who have joined us through Patreon recently. We've got Corey, Sci-Fi Warrior, Damon, Alexander, Jeremy, Chimichang, Tay, Matt, The All-Seeing Crow, Kairos, not sure, Addicted to, Daniel, Lando, Blair, Freak God 69, Richard, Kyle, T, Charles, and Jamie. Thank you all so much. Your support is genuinely appreciated, and it allows us to do what we do around here. So thank you very much. If you have a moment, please visit the website at hailsatanpodcast.com. You'll find links to join me on social media, a form to send me an email, and a link to join up with us all on Patreon. We have a few different tiers to choose from with various benefits, including the amazing Greetings from Hell Satanic Postcard of the Month Club. That is the most direct way you can support me and this show if you'd like to do so. Visit hailsatanpodcast.com. And before we get to Aaron, I'd like to ask my man Jerry here to deliver a word from our sponsor, Satan Street Coffee. So, Jerry, what's up with this Satan Street Coffee?
I've got to go, so I'm going to tell this shit real quick.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to do this real fast. This is by far the finest coffee I've ever had in my mouth in my 45 years. I started drinking coffee when I was an infant. In fact,
Wow, Jerry.
Real story, though, and I won't just to take away from the ad for a second.
Okay.
My parents couldn't afford milk. Milk was very expensive in the 70s, but they had a lot of Coca-Cola. So they gave me Coca-Cola in my bottle.
Are you fucking serious?
That's a real thing. So like I would drink caffeine as a small child. So
Wow.
know that I have been conditioned to enjoy the taste and the feeling of being alert. What I like about this Satan Street Coffee is I'm not jittery. I can actually overload the scoops and not be jittery.
You overload the scoops.
I do a scoop for every 2 cups generally.
Okay.
But I can actually match, which is it's strong as fuck, but I can match the cups to the scoops and still be very happy with the flavor that's going on in my mouth. It's not like Starbucks, which is like way too bold sometimes and it just gives you jitters. This stuff right here is the perfect caffeinated high.
This stuff right here that you're referring to is Satan Street Coffee, which can be found at satanstreetcoffee.com. They do donate 6.66% of their sales to the Satanic
Temple and everybody. And also, if on top of that, subscribing will also save you 6.66%.
That's true.
I cannot.
That's true.
Listen, as a car salesman, I can't fathom giving away 13-something% of my profit.
They're a young, new business.
Well,
they're a small business, and they're trying to get it moving.
This would make sense if they were doing shit coffee. Like, okay, just throw the beans in there. No. They're taking them from ethically sourced farms, Holder Farms.
Yeah, as we've indicated on this show, they don't actually use slaves.
No slaves. So the the coffee ships in a day. It's roasted for optimal freshness. Arrives in about a week for most customers.
Free shipping, did we mention?
Free shipping.
I love to mention free shipping because I fucking love free shipping on anything.
And I hate paying shipping. Because you'll see something that's a good deal, like I buy canvases online.
Yeah.
Oh, $35. Shipping, $14. You're like, God damn it.
All right,
Cancel.
guys. Well, look, help out satanstreetcoffee.com. I mean, if we're being honest, you're not really helping them out. You're helping yourself out by purchasing their product.
And take it from me.
They're making slave free.
Take it from me.
Take it from Jerry.
Take it from me. This is a good cup of coffee, and their damned opening sale is still going on right now. Can I say the tagline? I've always wanted to say it. We've never said it. Hail Satan, hail coffee.
There you go. All right, guys, visit satanstreetcoffee.com. Hit that jingle.
For the best satanic coffee, go to Satan Street Coffee. Satan Street Coffee is the best. Fuck yeah.
All right, guys, we are now joined by Aaron. Welcome to the show, Aaron.
Hey, Joseph. It's good to be here.
Great to have you. I guess we're going to start right at the beginning, wherever that is. Tell me how, when, why did you come to identify as a Satanist?
So my journey to Satanism was probably very similar to a lot of other people my age. For reference, I'm 26 years old. I heard about the Satanic Temple through just like a random news story or something. And by this time, I had already deconverted from Christianity. I was very avid anti-theist at the time. So it appealed to me very strongly because it scratched that itch of, if the Christians are going to do it, why can't we? So that really appealed to me. And my first kind of interaction with the temple was through the 7 tenets, which are, as you've said in previous podcasts, very well put together in a way that they're extremely agreeable to someone like me. So it very heavily drew me in. And then I did kind of a little bit of research into the history of Satanism and found the Church of Satan, did reading about that. And that's kind of where I more align myself these days, more so with the Church of Satan than the Satanic Temple, at least in terms of the actual principles of each organization.
Would you say that you still have an appreciation for the 7 tenets?
Yeah, absolutely. But I feel as though they're too vague to really be useful in a sense.
Sure.
Anton was very good about making statements and drawing lines in the sand, which is something that I can appreciate, even if some of the lines he drew were a little ridiculous
Sure.
in some cases.
Sure.
And, in other cases, even downright malicious. I respect the fact that he decided to create that boundary. Whereas, with the Satanic Temple, it's a little bit more laissez-faire.
And if I remember correctly, the subject of our focus today came up in one of Satanic Delco's Zoom meetings. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, we just sort of
actually
stumbled upon it in a conversation, I guess.
Yeah, well, so I believe we were trying to open up with some satanic news stuff.
Yes.
And no one had anything. So I just volunteered to do like an on the spot little speech about my personal philosophy.
Right. That's, yes, I remember now. And the topic was more or less a satanic perspective on self-care or self-help. Is that something that you've more recently come to have an interest in, or has that always been a high priority for you?
Self-care has always been a high priority for me. I'm pretty sure I have undiagnosed ADHD, and one of my obsessions is with maximizing effectiveness. So, for example, in the first time I played through Borderlands, I did literally everything before I finished the main quest. Like, I 100%ed the game before I finished it. That's just the way that I'm built. So for real life, it just kind of followed along that I tried to absorb as much as possible to basically learn how to do my life in a maximized way. It's only recently that I kind of connected the dots to Satanism. It's almost as if I had these two philosophies that I thought were separate, but didn't realize the overlaps between them until I'd say maybe like a month or so ago, something like that.
Yeah, you've described it as having an obsession with self-help.
Yeah.
Is that about right?
That's a very good way to put it.
Do you feel like there's also a bit of a cultural obsession with it as well? I know within our community, Satanism generally, there's always a bit of a focus on it, but that surely extends to the outside world, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Go into like any Barnes and Noble or a Books A Million or even just a local library, and fully at least a quarter of the books in there are going to be some form of self-help book of some kind, whether it's dietary or fitness or mental health or spiritual health, anything like that. It's a huge industry. And there's a lot out there, basically.
Yeah, and I think that's not necessarily anything new. You know, for as long as I can remember, you know, being a kid in the 80s, watching like infomercials and things on TV, I'd see Tony Robbins and all these various different people that would come along. You know, I think there is a different feeling about it now in society generally, maybe in our culture. There maybe was a bit of a, I don't know if stigma is exactly the word for it back in the day, but it was, I don't know, maybe not taken as seriously. It wasn't as permeated all throughout the way it is today. And again, definitely within our culture, our communities within Satanism, it's something that we talk about a lot. We talk about it in the context of ritual and, you know, just a general focus on the self, which is in a way uniquely satanic.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, especially when it comes to the solo ritual practices that have been popularized in satanic circles. A lot of them tend to focus a lot on, I want to say, like mental and emotional well-being, as well as like focusing one's mind on a goal as well. Like a lot of rituals are kind of geared in that direction.
Yeah, people often create a ritual or use a ritual that is purpose made for something. You know, an unbaptism ritual is fairly specific. And when people do something like a destruction ritual, we have a thing floating around on our side called a liberation ritual. And all of those are sort of uniquely defined by the individual.
Yeah, and Shiva Honey, the book that she published through the Satanic Temple with the solo rituals there, I've tried to incorporate those into my life. I had a friend, actually. I'm in a habit of wearing a pentagram when I go out in public. It's just my thing.
Sure.
And he asked me about it. He asked me if I was in pagan circles. And he asked me if I did spells and witchcraft and rituals like that. And the answer I gave him was yes, but I don't ever try to control anything outside of myself. And
Right.
I think that's where a good deal of Satanists, at least in our circle, I would say particularly Satanic Delco, I feel like that's the predominant use of ritual.
Definitely, yeah. I would say there may be outliers. There's always a few with a slightly different vibe, which is cool. But I think mostly we are grounded in that way. You know, our group seems to attract people that are more into the grounded version of it. Less magical spells to affect something out there in the world, less curses and things like that, and more of that focus on the self, yeah. And so I know I have a few sources of inspiration for you, but how have you personally found the ideas or sources that work best for you? Is it just a matter of doing research on the topic or, you know, some trial and error?
Mostly trial and error. I just read a lot and I'll test run some ideas, you know, try it out for like a month or two. And if it works, then I stick with it. And if it doesn't, it gets jettisoned along with everything else that doesn't work. It's a lot of trial and error, and a lot of ideas just don't work with me. And this is more of a personal thing. It's always not going to be a one size fits all type of deal. So for example, I know I mentioned a book to you when we were first talking about doing this meeting, Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. It's a fantastic book. The primary thrust of the book is that if there is any minuscule aspect over which you can exercise control over a situation, you need to take ownership of whatever amount of control you have and maximize it for your benefit. It's the idea that there will always be things that we can't control. Like it's not up to me whether or not it rains tomorrow, but there are always things that I can control. Like I can decide whether or not I'd wash my dishes before the night's done. And it's all those little tiny things that we need to take extreme ownership of, as the book would say, that can make our lives better. Because if you've done all you can do and things still turn out in a negative way, then you've done everything that you can do.
Part of the essay you wrote, so for some background, guys, Aaron wrote a short essay on this topic talking about the idea of freedom through discipline. And that's sort of the core of this idea of yours, right? Freedom through discipline?
Yeah, that's basically it.
And part of your essay talks about Jocko, and he has a book. I don't know that it's this. I think it's a different book maybe than the one you mentioned. He has one. I believe it's called the Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual. Is that where that idea comes from, or those words?
So he mentions it. It's actually the last chapter of the book, Extreme Ownership, where he first mentions the disciplined freedom idea.
Gotcha.
I have not yet read the follow-up book that you mentioned.
Okay, so this one is the second one of those.
Right.
And if you guys are curious, I have a little audio trailer here that Jocko released for that book, and it can just give you a taste of what Jocko's deal is. So here we go.
People look for the shortcut. The hack. The shortcut is a lie. The hack doesn't get you there. There is no easy way. There is only discipline. You can't control other people. The only person you can control is you. You have control over your mind. Weakness. I'm nothing but weakness. I get emotional over stupid things. I eat the wrong foods. I don't sleep enough. I procrastinate and I waste time. I care too much about stupid things and not enough about important things. In all those ways, I am weak. But I don't accept that. So often, the easy path calls us to be weak for that moment, to give in to short-term gratification. Discipline will not allow that. Discipline can seem like your worst enemy, but in reality, it is your best friend. Discipline. It will make you better and stronger and smarter and faster and healthier than anything else. And most important, it will make you free. Discipline equals freedom.
God damn, that dude is intense.
He really is.
He's
and
intense.
like if even watching him talk, like even if you have the sound muted, you can tell he's really into it.
Yeah. What exactly is Jocko's background? He's a military guy. Do you know anything more specific than that?
He was a Navy SEAL. More than that, though, he was the captain of a group that was tasked in the war in Afghanistan, but I'm not 100% on that.
Yeah.
I'd recommend getting better information from like Wikipedia or something.
Sure.
I'm not the person to ask.
Yeah. I'm not super familiar with Jocko, but I've seen him around. You know, I've heard him on a podcast or two, and yeah, he's kind of what you might imagine when you hear that clip. He's a large kind of buff man, you know, shaved head pretty much. Just he's got a giant head and face. That's always what stands out to me.
He's a huge dude too. He's super tall.
Yeah, and even this audio that you just heard was from a YouTube trailer that was out for this book. And, you know, in the background, there's just all this intense footage, Jocko just slamming weights and just dust flying. And, you know, it's exactly what you probably think it is. And so there was one. And another one that inspired you, I believe, is also a Navy SEAL, Admiral William McRaven.
Not a Navy SEAL. He was in the Navy, but not a Navy SEAL. Admiral McRaven was the captain of a submarine that he basically had to learn how to run over the course of 2 weeks because the previous captain decided that he no longer wanted to work for the Navy. I don't know exactly how that works, but he just left. So they transferred Admiral McRaven out to this submarine. It was a brand new submarine. It was technology that had never been used in the Navy before that time. So he had to learn how to use it from the bottom up. And he has an amazing story. He's got a great TED Talk that I recommend watching sometime. I believe it's called the McRaven Doctrine. It's about delegating leadership to the entire hierarchy.
Admiral McRaven suggests if you want to change the world, make your bed. And I have a short clip of him so you guys can get an idea. Let's hear him.
If you want to change the world, start off by making your bed. If you make your bed every morning, you will have accomplished the first task of the day. It will give you a small sense of pride, and it will encourage you to do another task, and another, and another. And by the end of the day, that one task completed will have turned into many tasks completed. Making your bed will also reinforce the fact that the little things in life matter. If you can't do the little things right, you'll never be able to do the big things right. And if by chance you have a miserable day, you will come home to a bed that is made, that you made. And a made bed gives you encouragement that tomorrow will be better.
There we go. So what is it about those two guys in particular that really means something for you?
It's all about making the most of what is directly within your power to change. It's directing your locus of control to the inner world more than the outer world. I should probably explain that a little bit.
Sure.
So there's a concept in psychology. It's pretty basic. It's like a Psych 101 thing of locus of control. You've got people with an internal locus of control and people with external locus of control. An internal locus of control is someone who believes that for the most part, they are in control of what happens to them and where their life goes. Mm-hmm. External is the opposite. They feel that control lies mostly beyond themselves. And what many, many studies have found is that people who have that internal locus of control, who feel that they are in charge of their lives, consistently are happier. They consistently experience more success in mainstream ideas of what success looks like. They consistently are healthier. It's basically an entire win for having that internal locus of control. And that's kind of what drew me to this to begin with. Like, that was my introduction into this idea, because I used to have a very external locus of control. And I barely escaped getting sucked into incel ideology and rhetoric.
I'd like you to talk a little bit about that part of it. What were you feeling, and what was that mindset when you had that more external view?
Essentially, what I felt at the time, I mean, to be a little bit vulnerable here, was that I didn't have the body and the face that I needed to be able to get a girlfriend and have a happy relationship. That's pretty much cut and dry exactly what it was. And that really bummed me out. But over time, like I listened to Jordan Peterson, of all people.
Yeah, we're going to get to him as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know he's kind of a controversial figure, but listening to him really snapped me out of that mindset and got me more into that mindset of do the things that you can. Take control of the things that you have control of and do everything possible with those things. Because once you've done that, even though like the external world is going to do whatever it's going to do, but if you've taken control of what you can change and you maximize your effectiveness in those areas, then whatever happens is no longer up to you. Like, it's not on you at all. It's entirely external. So it's like a weird kind of doublethink thing where you have to understand that there will always be things beyond your control.
Sure.
But at the same time, it is supremely beneficial to believe that you yourself are in total control of your life and that you are completely responsible for how your life goes. At least that's the way it was for me. I don't want this to be a prescriptive speech in any way.
No, for sure. Yeah.
This is my personal journey through this. And obviously, people are going to have their own journey.
Yeah. And it's no surprise. To me, it feels sort of obvious that people that have this internal focus, who decide or feel that they are in control, are more likely to find greater success in whatever parts of life, personal life, business, well, you name it, education.
Yeah, because it feels like a no-brainer, but it's really hard to live sometimes.
Of course, the world is hard. Things don't go our way. There's any number of obstacles and tragedies and problems in general that are thrown at us all the time. But it does seem like it would be hard for a person with a mindset that tells them they're just sort of dust in the wind, being victimized or carried around the world against their will. Of course, that type of mindset doesn't feel to me like the one that is going to accomplish goals and make significant progress. It feels like there's a lot of built-in excuses waiting to be had there. And like you just mentioned, the last name that you had on your list here is potentially a controversial figure for some of the more sensitive Satanists among us for various reasons, and that is Dr. Jordan Peterson, and specifically his book, 12 Rules for Life. I haven't read his book, but I do have the list of his 12 rules right here. Should we go over those?
Yeah, I think it would be good.
All right, I'll go through them. Number 1 is stand up straight with your shoulders back. Number 2, treat yourself like you are someone you are responsible for helping. 3, make friends with people who want the best for you. Number 4, compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. Number 5, do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. 6, set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. 7, pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. Number 8, tell the truth, or at least don't lie. Number 9, assume that the person you are listening to might know something you don't. Number 10, be precise in your speech. Number 11, do not bother children while they are skateboarding. Number 12, pet a cat when you encounter one in the street. So, are there some rules in that list that really stand out for you personally, or that have really, made an impact?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I believe I should call out, I mentioned earlier that there are certain bits and pieces that I jettisoned out of this. Sure. And I have to say the rule 5, do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. That's one of those things. The rest of the book is pretty good, but that particular chapter is a little wonky, to put it nicely.
Sure.
But everything else is really good, solid, almost kind of common sense life advice. You want to act as though you are responsible for helping yourself, like treat yourself like someone you're responsible for helping. That's just great life advice. If you had a friend, for example, who, let's say they were just tired all the time and you found out they were chugging 4 Red Bulls a day and going to sleep at 4 a.m. in the morning and getting up at 9 to go to their job, like, you would have some very pointed advice for that person.
God, it's funny when you say those words. I know exactly who I'm going to play this episode for. I've got a person in mind. You just described a person.
Am I in trouble?
No,
Maybe.
It'll be great.
Okay. All right, then. But like I said, like you would have some very pointed advice for that person. That is kind of an extreme example, but it illustrates the point that you want to act towards yourself in a way that you would act towards someone that you actively care for.
Sure.
Because you should actively care for yourself. It's literally self-care. It's self-help in that way. Another really big one is the rule 6, set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world.
Yeah.
there's a lot to be said about not letting the best be the enemy of the good. But at the same time, you're going to be much better able to lend yourself to the problems of the world if you have a solid base on which to stand.
It's almost a version of what is the saying?
People in glass houses shouldn't throw stones.
Right. Makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, it's one of these obvious things that, of course, so many of us don't always adhere to because it's easy not to. But I think it's certainly good advice.
And you can see, we're on a Zoom call right now, and you can see the state of my bedroom at the moment. I definitely need to take in Rule 6 a little bit more. I feel a little bit weird talking about this sort of thing with my living space and the state that it's in. It's not like horrible. There's there's no food left out or anything, but it's definitely messy.
Well, yeah. And the idea that you have found this information or these ideas that interest you and work for you, and you spend the time to think about them and make any attempt to implement them in your life, I think is the bulk of the work. You know, the end result for any of us is rarely going to be what we could call perfect.
There's an aphorism that's been attributed to Plato, and it goes, "You should never discourage a man who is making progress, regardless of how slow."
Yes, true. You're not being timed. It's not a race. You're a young person and you're working to better yourself. So, of course, a messy room is going to pop up from time to time. Just like any other aspect of these things, you know, I'm sure there's a day where you're less precise in your speech than you would like to be, or anything else, you know. And yeah, he says, set your house in perfect order. And of course, you know, maybe he doesn't mean perfect order, but, you know, as close as we can get. The idea is to focus on your own shit before you go criticizing the world.
Yeah. And the idea of having 12 rules for life ties back into what we've been talking about, which is taking control of the things that you can actually have control over.
Yeah.
Like I have the power in my body right now to fix this. And the fact that I haven't means that I have something left to do. And once I take control of that, once I regain that ownership of this situation, I will inevitably become a happier person. I know it to be true, because in the times that my living space is in pristine order, my mental space is much less cluttered. I can think more clearly. It's just tying straight back into that.
Yeah. And I think even that night on our Satanic Delco Zoom chat, when all of this came up, we were talking, what came to my mind when you were describing all of this was sort of a specific period of my life. It's not really my current period of life, unfortunately, but a few years back, and for a few years at least, I had a much more dialed in mindset that matched this a bit. I was a bit more regimented. That regimented lifestyle I was living was completely determined by myself. I didn't have a boss or anybody telling me anything that I needed to do. It was sort of all on me. I was getting up very early. I was going right to the gym or the track to run, and then I was home to start chipping away at the to-do list and making a lot of progress. And I was fueled by a lot of these type of thoughts, just being in control and focusing on myself in a way that wasn't always super kind, maybe, which is to say I was maybe being a little harsh internally. But I will say the results were really good. I was pleased. And when I look back at that time, I'm sort of envious of the former me. I'd like to be able to find a way to flip the switch and dial back into some of that. And so maybe that's something I'll be able to do in my advanced age.
One thing that I kind of would like to say in relation to that, there was a study done in 2010 by a Stanford University researcher. I forget their name right now, but basically what the study found was that people who believed that willpower was a finite resource tended to deplete their willpower at a faster rate than the people who did not believe that to be the case. So, in other words, if you believe that you have infinite willpower, you basically do. At least that's the finding of this one particular study. There have been other studies since then who have, added on to that.
Sure.
But it's the concept that if you believe you have the willpower to do something, you have the willpower to do it.
That feels true to me. It really does. When I, at that time that I described, running was a big thing for me. And I was never a runner. I never wanted to be a runner. There was nothing that looked fun about it. And as I got into doing it just for fitness, I'd started sort of begrudgingly. And I found that there really was nothing fun about it, but it wasn't about fun. It was entirely a mental challenge for me. I would run on the same track basically every day, and I was motivated by the numbers. I said, all right, I've ran a 5K in this time, and I never want to run that time ever again. My time can only increase, or my speed can only increase. My time would decrease. So I never wanted to slide backward. And it was torturous sometimes in the physical sense. Running hurts, you're out of shape. It's not great. But I found that it was a mental challenge. I know this run is going to hurt, and I know at some point I'm going to have to stop. How hard can I push? How long can I push myself through the pain? And that was the challenge. And it really felt like a mental game more than a physical game.
That describes almost exactly my current relationship with weightlifting.
Yes.
But the way that I push through it is not necessarily in the same way that you did. It's actually by relating it more directly to Satanism, my personal religious beliefs. I guess you would say my own little version of outsider Satanism, that I continue to go to the gym and continue to lift those weights and, have sore muscles the next day.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you specifically, current day, you're a Satanist. You mentioned you were a Christian at one point growing up, perhaps. So how would you describe the application of these ideas when you were practicing as a Christian, if you did?
Essentially, what I was taught was that I needed to take care of my body because at any moment in time, God would call upon me to do some act of service, or would need me to go and talk to someone or do any number of things. And I needed to be personally ready for any of those things. So that was being able to speak clearly on the spot and explain my position to people, debate ideas, things like that, as well as just having the physical stamina in a lot of cases to go and pound doors for hours at a time. It was really an act of subdued worship in a way to maintain my health and to sharpen my skills as a speaker and a conversationalist.
And the idea there was to make yourself the best you could be in order to serve God as best you could.
Exactly. Yeah, right. That's exactly it.
Right. And so now, current day, you're a Satanist, and these principles involving discipline work in mostly the same way in the context of Satanism?
Yeah. So, just like I would live that life of worship for the Christian God at that point in my life, now that I am my own God, as LaVeyan Satanism would kind of purport, thyself is thy master.
Yeah.
I live that same life of worship just for a different being. It's no longer for a Christian God that I can't see, hear, or touch and understand. It's for a person that I deeply know. I know everything that I want. I know everything that I would like to do. I can listen to my innermost thoughts to understand myself. And it's the exact same concept of being ready at any time to engage in any of those things.
Yeah, it's not exactly the same, maybe, but I've always had this sort of, I don't know if it's a silly idea, but my idea was always that at any time, you have to be prepared to either run or fight.
Right, yeah.
At any moment, and that sort of played into, like, you need to have the right shoes. You need to have the right shoes on. You can't be wearing flip-flops because at any moment you may need to run or fight, and those things are going to be a problem.
Yeah, it's a similar thing.
Yeah. Now, do you find that generally Satanists tend to be a little, I don't know, softer when it comes to these type of ideas? Or do you think it depends more on which type of satanic ideology they subscribe to? More of a Church of Satan vibe on one side and maybe more of a Satanic Temple type vibe on the other?
So this is an interesting question. It's not something that I've thought about, but I believe I would have to say that the Church of Satan and LaVeyan Satanism generally lends itself more to this way of thinking than the tenets of the Satanic Temple. And the reason I say that has mostly to do with the more unfortunate sides of LaVeyan Satanism, which would be the social Darwinism and the Midas right ideas. But I mean, in answering your question, I think that's probably where I would land.
Yeah, that feels right to me. It does feel like, I don't know, if it had to be closer to one or the other, certainly closer to LaVeyan Satanism.
Yeah. Now, the ideas do relate very easily to other principles of the Church of Satan. So, for example, like if we were to look at the 9 satanic statements, number 1, it says Satan represents indulgence instead of abstinence. So I relate this to the concept of, again, being ready at any point in time to allow myself to act on those indulgences. And in order to do that, to have that freedom, again, to be able to do that, I need to have a disciplined mindset to be able to keep my body in a good shape and keep my mind in a good shape as well.
Yeah. And, this might be slightly off topic, but I meant to ask it earlier. In the case of someone like Jordan Peterson and maybe even the other authors that we talked about, do you ever have any issue with taking information of value from them while not agreeing or aligning with them completely or on other issues? We usually talk about it in the context of separating the art from the man, as they say.
I personally don't have any issues with that. I believe good people can say bad things and bad people can say good things. I don't necessarily believe in good and bad people. I just believe in people who do good and bad things. So even though LaVeyan Satanism has all this baggage that comes with it, there is still a lot of good things that come with it. Same thing with the Jordan Peterson book that I mentioned. Rule 5 is a pretty strong sticking point for me. That's by far my least favorite chapter in the book by a long shot. But at the same time, the rest of it is pretty sound advice, or at least I have found it to be pretty sound advice for my personal life. And I have no issues with Admiral McRaven or anything that Jocko Willink has said in either of their books that I mentioned.
Yeah, I don't know anything about those guys' politics or other aspects of their life. I have no idea. But, if I had to guess, there are plenty of things to disagree with. I mean, and really that describes just about everyone in the world. There's plenty of things to disagree with, but you can still find what is valuable. And I suspected you surely would be able to do that, but I'm always interested in that conversation because, some folks, we do have a tendency to, you see the messenger and sort of tune out to whatever the message could be, potentially leaving valid information behind.
Now, I am a strong believer in recognizing patterns and acting accordingly.
Sure.
If someone has a very consistent history of saying completely unhelpful things or malicious things,
yes,
I am fully in favor of tuning that person out.
Sure. Yeah, makes sense. You also mentioned a bit about stealing from the church to develop our own practices.
Yeah,
and
so
that leads us to your interpretation of the 7 deadly sins. Maybe you can talk a bit about that.
Yeah. So essentially, the idea is in order to engage in the indulgences instead of abstinence, as Anton would have us do, we kind of have to understand what the indulgences are so that we can, properly indulge in them.
Sure.
Pride, for example, in order to be prideful of yourself, you have to kind of feel good about yourself. It's an unfortunate reality of the world. But once you do something and you do it well and you know you've done it well, that's immediate pride in that thing. The next obvious one would be greed, for example. So doing very well at your job or learning helpful skills like a second language or something like that, that's going to allow you to excel in the workplace and be able to accumulate more money to yourself so that you can indulge in that greed. Envy as well. Envy is rooted in greed. It's basically the idea of trying to keep up with the Jones. If you're envious of something, you go out and you, in whatever way most appeals to you, you make yourself worthy of that thing. You accumulate your resources needed to get it, or you, for example, go to a gym and build the body that you want so that you can, get a girlfriend or get a relationship. That's at least my experience with that.
Yeah.
Lust is an easy one to follow along with trying to take care of your body and grooming and hygiene and everything like that. It's all the little tiny things that you kind of don't think about on a day-to-day basis, but you need it in order to be able to indulge in that. Anger is a bit of a weird one because generally speaking, I don't like to exercise anger, but there are definitely cases where it's completely fine and even morally correct to be angry and exercise anger, and being able to act on that in an effective way, to be able to determine the correct way to go about utilizing that and then having the actual wherewithal to take care of it. That's a big thing. What I wrote in my essay for gluttony was that it's a necessary part of your life to live a fit life. You have to have that energy in order to fuel your mind, to fuel your body, to, again, be able to engage in these other indulgences. And then sloth, the last of them, you got to take time for yourself, just for that rest, to recharge your mental batteries, to recharge your emotional batteries. Sometimes you just need a lazy day.
Sure.
And again, that's another one of the things that I think Anton would be happy to see more of us doing.
Yeah, this is all particularly the view of those 7 deadly sins as we have come to know them is a very LaVeyan viewpoint, I think.
Yeah, this is due obviously mostly to my personal perspective.
Yeah.
And again, I find myself more aligning with the Church of Satan in aspects like this in terms of actually creating a belief system, a religion of sorts for myself to follow.
Now, you described how as a younger person you were struggling and you had this more external mindset, that you were almost a victim of your own existence in a way. Since you've found all of this and found the motivation to turn things around for yourself, do you find that you've seen tangible results that have led to you feeling better or finding different results out there in the world?
I would say certainly. I was talking with a friend the other day and just kind of casually chit-chatting back and forth. And I mentioned to her, I feel as though right now my life is continuously peaking. And what I mean by that is where I am right now is better than where I was 6 months ago. Yeah. And where I was then was better than 6 months prior to that. And then a year prior to that. And then a couple years prior to that. Like my life has been on a steady incline for the past 3 years. Not necessarily in every single area of my life, but if you take the average,
sure,
and kind of put it together, it's profoundly changed my life. To take the blue pill, in a sense, to steal a little bit of incel terminology, taking the blue pill and firmly believing that I was in full control of the direction of my life literally changed my life.
Yeah. That's about all you could hope for, right? That's a pretty good trajectory to be on.
And I do always try to be kind to myself and remember that quote that, we think Plato probably said, no matter how slow progress is, it's still progress.
Yeah.
So even if I don't necessarily do all of the things this week that I would like to have done, if I did more of them this week than I did last week, I'm still making progress.
Yeah.
And I try to be kind to myself in that way, that even though I might not be as far along as I would hope to be, I'm still further than I was.
Yeah. And the effort is such a big part of it. Just the idea that you are making the effort and holding yourself accountable. Even the, LaVey's idea of responsibility to the responsible and just a general personal responsibility standpoint, I think is really important in all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is part of why I really didn't want to come out here and try to be prescriptive and lay out a way for people to live their best lives possible. Like there's already so much out there on the internet that fills that void. Sure. I don't think I need to add my voice to it.
Well, really, people will hear us chat on here and they'll hear the perspective of a young person in their 20s who is a Satanist, and I suspect it's mostly Satanists that listen to this. And if I were to guess, I'm going to guess that it's mostly Satanists that lean more toward something like the Satanic Temple, or perhaps they're interested in outsider Satanism versus LaVeyan Satanism. And for those people to hear you say that you align more with the Church of Satan, but yet have these ideas that I don't think in any way are dangerous or, I don't know, negative in any way, that someone who does enjoy the Satanic Temple's vibe, there's no reason that they couldn't understand and accept and apply all of these ideas to their life to their own benefit.
That's what I'm hoping. I really just wanted to be able to share my personal journey, my personal experience with self-help generally, as well as the effect of relating Satanism to it had on me. Because if anything at all, it fully renewed my commitment to be the best person I possibly can be.
Yeah.
Because what better way to express self-love than by considering yourself something worthy of worship and acting in such a way that you give yourself something worthy to worship. Yeah. I don't know if that made sense at all, but when I was a Christian, part of what drew me out of the church to begin with was just actually reading through the Bible. I know that's not a new story, particularly the Old Testament and Joshua in particular, and just all of the actual literal genocides that happened in the name of God. And I had to ask myself, is this really someone that I want to worship, even if this is a real being? And the answer obviously ended up being no. And then later on in my journey, I actually became an atheist. I was an anti-theist against God before I stopped believing in God, which is probably an unusual journey for people.
It doesn't seem unreasonable, though. You know, if we find out one day that the God we've read about in the Bible is real, can we like him? It's hard.
Right.
It's hard to like him.
But if I consider myself my own God, I am in control of who that person is and whether or not they are worthy to be worshipped. And that is probably the most motivating part of my life currently.
Yeah. Well, Aaron, this is cool. And is there anything that you think we've missed out on that you want to get out there? Have we missed anything?
I feel pretty much like we covered all the bases. I feel like I said everything that I needed to say.
All right.
And hopefully this ends up being helpful to some people.
Yeah, I think it should be. Before I let you go, do you have any kind of online presence or anything like that you want to share so people can find you if you want to be found?
Well, I'm on the Satanic Delco Discord. If anyone wants to hit me up and chat, I'm definitely down.
Right on.
But nothing like a YouTube channel or anything.
Cool. Well, Aaron, thank you very much for doing this with me.
Thanks for having me, Joseph.
You got it. I look forward to chatting with you. Take it easy. All right. Now, before I let you all go, I do have a small favor to ask. If you can, I would love it if you would leave a nice review and rating on your podcast platform where you listen to this show, particularly if you listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I suppose it helps other people discover the show. And that's it. If you have a moment, please visit the website at hailsatanpodcast.com. Stay safe out there, please, and hail Satan.
Evil free service,